Hi, my name is Michelle, and this is Dawson, also known as Brand X. And we're going to show you what actually goes into a bag of pet foods. We'll do a fun demonstration and show you cup by cup, ingredient by ingredient, what goes into making a 6-kilo bag of Origin Original versus a 6-kilo bag of Brand X. So what is Brand X? Well, Brand X is a grain-free food that's typically found in pet specialty stores. And hopefully by the end of the demonstration, what you'll realize is that even though Origin is a grain-free food, it's a biologically appropriate food, and it's much different than conventional or typical grain-free foods. So before we get started, why are we doing this and why should this matter to you? Well, you're pet specialists. And pet lovers come into your store because they're looking for your expertise and your product knowledge. And so it's our hope by doing this demonstration, we're going to give you a few tips to help you make a trusted recommendation so pet lovers can make the right choice for their dogs or for their cats. All right, so if we're ready to go, let's begin. So taking a look at my very first ingredient on my recipe card, it looks like here I've got 8 cups of fresh chicken. So I'm going to go ahead and add that to my mixing bowl. So this fresh chicken comes from trusted local suppliers in Western Canada. And this fresh chicken is also special because it's fresh and whole. So we use what's called the whole prey concept. And whole prey, we like to say, is superfood for dogs and cats. It includes the muscle meat, the organs, the bone, the cartilage. And the beauty of whole prey is you're supplementing a dog or a cat naturally. But we're going to talk more about whole prey later. Let's move on to Brand X and see what the first ingredient is in Brand X.
First up for Brand X is 10 cups of deboned chicken.
So obviously, visually, you can see that this is a much different ingredient than what I've added to my food. So oftentimes when retailers or pet lovers, they look at an ingredient panel and they see deboned chicken, it's natural that they typically think that it's fresh or it's a raw or a frozen ingredient. But it can also be what Dawson has just added here, which is 4 parts water to 1 part chicken. So a big difference in ingredients here. You should know that not only is this a dry or a processed ingredient, it's also not in whole prey ratios. You're missing the benefits of Mother Nature, the organs as well as the cartilage. So let's move on to the next ingredient that we have in Origin, which is fresh turkey. So I'm going to go ahead and add in 4 cups of fresh turkey. So I've just added in 4 cups of fresh turkey. So just like the chicken, this fresh turkey comes from trusted local suppliers in Western Canada and also comes in whole prey ratios. So again, we're using the muscle meat, the organs, as well as the cartilage. And just like the chicken, this ingredient is sourced out locally, so it comes from trusted local suppliers in Western Canada. So Dawson, what do you have next on your ingredient panel?
Next up for Brand X is 2 cups of chicken and turkey meal.
So you can see what Dawson has added here is typical of most pet foods today. He's added in a conventional meal to his food. There's a few things that you need to know about conventional meals. First off, this ingredient has been cooked at a rendering plant, so you lose a lot of the nutritional integrity of the ingredient itself. The second thing you need to know about is what actually goes into this ingredient here. So most times pet lovers come into stores, they pick up their bag of food and they see that there's a whole chicken or there's a whole turkey on their bag. And this is what they believe actually goes into pet food. The truth is it's not. What goes into pet foods is actually typically just the animal frame. So the cuts of meat, they go to the grocery store and what's left over is the bone and a little bit of meat. So it's an extremely unbalanced ingredient. The third thing that you need to know about this ingredient is that it isn't necessarily past fit for human consumption. All the ingredients that go into Origin Original have been deemed fit for human consumption. So let's move on to the next thing on my ingredient list here. It looks like I've got some whole eggs. So I'm going to go ahead and add 2 cups of whole eggs. So these whole eggs, they come to us again from Western Canada, just like the chicken and turkey. They come from trusted suppliers, and we use the entire egg minus the shell. One great thing about eggs you should know about is eggs, it has the perfect amino acid profile. So it's a great source of protein for dogs and cats. So let's move on to Brand X. Brand X, do you have any eggs in your food?
Yes, I have half a cup of dried eggs.
So obviously you can see that Brand X here has added in dry ingredient. Dry ingredient has been processed. And also another thing you should know about this ingredient is it's been purchased through a broker. So again, you don't really know where this ingredient comes from. So let's move on to the next ingredient on my list. Looks like I have some fresh fish to add. So the first fish I'm going to add to my mixing bowl here is fresh whole herring. So you'll see that this fresh whole herring is nice and dark and rich in color. The reason why it's nice and dark and rich in color is because it's packed full of omega-3. So great source of omega-3, beautiful for skin and coats for dogs and cats. This ingredient also is a great ingredient. It comes from a trusted local supplier on the West Coast, a company called Celtic Seafoods, and again, arrives to our kitchens fresh and whole. Dawson, do you have any more meat ingredients to add or any fish to add to your food?
No, Michelle. I'm all out of meat on my side.
All right. Well, I have a little bit more meat to add, so I'm going to go ahead and add the next fish on my list, which is fresh whole flounder. So again, I've got a couple cups of the flounder to add to my mixing bowl here. And just like the herring, the flounder also comes from Celtic Seafoods. It comes from a trusted supplier. And what's great about this ingredient is that it is whole. And this is a key point of difference for this food. Most pet foods today, what typically goes into the food, the fillets, again, they go to the grocery store. What's left over for fish is head, tail, and rack. And we are using the entire fish, and this is just a beautiful way to supplement a dog and cat. So I'm going to go ahead and add my next ingredient, but first, Dawson, do you have any more meat or any more fish or anything to add? Are you sure?
No, no more meat.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and add some dry ingredient. So I've added in all my fresh, but I have some really incredible dehydrated ingredients. So I'm going to go ahead and add some dehydrated chicken, some turkey, whole mackerel, sardine, as well as herring. Now at first glance, this ingredient might look similar to what Dawson has added in his mixing bowl. However, it's quite different. This ingredient actually is custom made for Champion Pet Foods. It's a dehydrated ingredient cooked at a low temperature. It's also cooked in whole prey ratios, and all the animals used in this ingredient have all been deemed fit for human consumption. So what this ingredient allows us to do is provide a nice, rich, nourishing source of protein that fresh meat alone can't provide. So I believe that we've got all of our meat ingredients to the food, but anything else to add to yours?
Well, that's a lot more meat than we have here over at Brand X. I'm going to need to add something to my kibble in order to boost the protein levels. I'm going to add 3 cups of pea protein.
So the pea protein that Dawson has added to Brand X here, this is typically found in most pet foods today. And pea protein or other sources of plant protein, such as potato protein, these commonly bring up protein percentages in the guaranteed analysis, but there's 2 things that you really need to know about this ingredient. First of all, it's missing a lot of the essential amino acids, so it's not the best source of protein for dogs and cats. And the second thing that you need to know about this ingredient is it's not as bioavailable or as usable for dogs and cats. So dogs and cats are meant to get their protein from meat, so this is not a great source of protein. It's best that it comes from meat. So now that we've got all of our meat as well as our protein ingredients added to our food, we're going to have to add a little bit of carbohydrate. Carbohydrate is the binder that keeps the kibble together. So Dawson, do you have any carbohydrate to add to your food?
Yes, I have some peas. And I will also be adding some starch to my food in order to keep my kibble together. Here I'm adding 5 cups of potato starch, sweet potato, tapioca starch, and potato.
So this ingredient that Dawson has just added here to the food, this is quite common in most grain-free foods today, even the ones found in pet specialty stores. Potato starch, tapioca starch. These ingredients, there's a couple problems with them. They're extremely high on the glycemic index. So they cause all sorts of health issues in our pets. They are linked to diabetes, obesity. So it really is not a great source of carbohydrate. The second thing that you need to know about this ingredient is the amount that goes into this food. So most pet foods today feature 40 to as high as 60% carbohydrate. Dogs and cats require 0% carbohydrate. So again, this is all linked to all sorts of health issues in our pets. So when it comes to carbohydrate, we've thought of a couple things when it comes to making Origin Original. The first thing is how much, and the second thing is how fast. So when it comes to how much, we've added in as low as possible. So in Origin Original, feature maximum of 19% carbohydrate. The second thing we considered with Origin Original is how fast. So I'm going to go ahead and add my carbohydrate ingredients, and I've got a nice blend of carbohydrate sources. So I've got chickpeas, lentils, fruits and vegetables, such as pumpkin, butternut squash. I'm going to go ahead and add those to the food. And the beauty of these ingredients here is that not only are they nice and low on the glycemic index, but they're actually also a great source of vitamins, minerals, and also a great source of fiber. So now that I've got my fruits and vegetables in here, Dawson, how about you? Do you have any fruits and vegetables?
I do, but I guess they're a little on the dry side though.
So what Dawson has added into his food is, again, quite typical of most pet foods today. It's a dry ingredient, so it's been highly processed. And also on top of that, it comes from, again, unknown sources. It's purchased through a broker. The fruits and vegetables that we've added to our foods are all from trusted local suppliers. So let's move on to the next thing on the ingredient panel. Dawson, what's next on your list?
Next up for Brand X is flaxseed.
So Dawson has just added in flaxseed to his food, and flaxseed is commonly used in pet foods today as a source of omega-3. However, there's a problem with this ingredient. So dogs and cats, they're meant to eat meat, and this is actually a plant-based ingredient. And so they're not efficient at using this as a source of omega-3. So what is best as a source of omega-3 in foods is actually fish oil. So I'm going to go ahead and add in a little bit of herring oil to my food. And you'll notice here that I didn't have to add in a whole lot. And the reason why I didn't have to add in a whole lot of herring oil to my food is because of all the fresh fish that I added in earlier. And fresh fish really is the best source of omega-3. So now that I've got my herring oil added to my recipe here, I'm going to go ahead and add the next ingredient, which is botanicals. So I've got a bit of a blend of botanicals that I'm going to add here. These botanicals are added because in nature, dogs and cats, they forage on different grasses and plants. And what this does is this helps with the overall health and well-being for dogs and cats. So it's a digestive aid and immunity booster. Here's what I love about this ingredient. If you take a look at all the ingredients that I added to the food, it's actually a relatively small portion of the food. But no ingredient is too small for us to know where it's coming from. So all of our botanicals are custom grown for us, and they come from trusted local suppliers in Western Canada. So Dawson, any botanicals in Brand X?
Yes, I've got one.
So what Dawson's added here is one botanical. And again, sorry to repeat myself, but this is the case with most pet foods. Again, this ingredient is a commodity ingredient, so you never really know where that ingredient is coming from. So now that we've got most of our ingredients added in here, we need to do a bit of a check on our food to ensure that it's nice and balanced. Because of all the meat that I've added to the food, all the fresh meat, and all the variety in whole prey ratios, my food is actually pretty balanced. The only thing that I need to add to my food is a little bit of zinc. So I'm going to go ahead and add that. Dawson, how about you? Is your food fairly balanced?
No, in order to ensure my kibble is nutritionally balanced, I'm going to need to add 16 different minerals, along with 13 different vitamins, and finally, 2 amino acids.
So this is fairly common in pet foods today. So if you take a look at an ingredient panel, most grain-free foods are heavily supplemented. So synthetic vitamins, minerals, amino acids, just like what Dawson has added in here. Here's the trouble with that. If you take a look at studies, even on the human side, those synthetics or those additives, it's questionable if they're even usable. So what we do know is this: it's best to get vitamins, minerals, nutrients from Mother Nature and from the food itself. So now that we've got all of our ingredients in here, our foods are nice and balanced. I believe, however, there's one more ingredient for Brand X. Go ahead, Brand X.
That's true, and as you can probably tell, my mixing container is quite dry. I can't make a kibble out of this. Therefore, I'm going to need to add 8 cups of water.
And so for Origin Original, you'll see that I don't need to add any water at all. And the reason why is because of all the fresh ingredients that I've added in my food. There's no need to add any water. It steam cooks in its own natural juices. So now that we've mixed up all of our ingredients, it's time for us to begin the cooking process. So you're going to have to use your imagination a little bit here. We don't have all of our kitchen equipment. So there's a couple things that you need to know about the cooking process when it comes to Origin Original versus Brand X. The first thing that you need to know is that with Origin foods, we cook at a nice low temperature. So we're not cooking at a high temperature similar to Brand X. And the second thing that you need to know is we make our foods in nice small batches and it's slow cooking. And that again is to protect the nutritional integrity of all these beautiful ingredients. Versus Brand X, which is again cooked high temperature in a fairly quick process. So again, you lose a lot of the nutritional integrity of all the ingredients that Dawson's just added. So what are the results of the cooking process? So we're going to take a look at the final product and we'll talk a little bit about the final product itself and what the foods look like. Because when you take a closer look at the kibble itself, the kibble also tells a story. There's a difference between a biologically appropriate kibble versus Brand X. So the first thing that you're going to notice about biologically appropriate Origin is that it's nice and dark and rich in color. Compare that to Brand X. Brand X is a little lighter in color. And the reason why Origin Original is a little dark in color is because of all those meats that we've added into the food. The second thing you'll notice is that the kibble itself is a little bit misshapen. And the reason why it's misshapen is because of all the fresh meats that we've added to the food, and also the kibble itself, or the food itself, is low in carbohydrate. And so it's hard to keep the kibble together versus Brand X, which is a more uniform shape. And the third thing you'll notice is if you break apart the kibble, that also tells a story as well too. If you take a look at biologically appropriate Origin, you'll see that the kibble inside is quite dense, similar to a piece of meat, versus breaking apart Brand X or most grain-free foods today, you'll see lots of tiny little air pockets. And those air pockets represent starch. And that's because the food is quite high in carbohydrate, high in starch. So let's go back to the beginning. Recommending a food for dogs and cats. How do you do that? Well, we always recommend that you should use what we call meat math, which are 3 meat questions. How much meat, how much fresh meat, and how much variety. So taking a closer look at Origin, when it comes to meat, there's a lot of meat in there. We've added in 85% meat. Versus Brand X has 25, maybe 35% meat. So a big difference in meat content. The second meat math question is how fresh? So you saw all the fresh ingredients that we've added into the food. Out of the 85% meat, 2/3 is fresh, versus Brand X and most pet foods today have little to zero fresh. And the third meat math question is how many? So if you remember from earlier what we added into the food, we've added in chicken, turkey, several different types of fish, eggs, all in whole prey ratios, reflective of the natural diet. Versus Brand X here, very little variety, 1-2 different types of meat and no whole prey ratios. So what are the results of a food that's nice and rich in meat content, that has variety, that has fresh? Well, the result is it's a food that's nice and rich in protein coming from meat as opposed to plant, and a food that's nice and low in carbohydrate, which is perfectly appropriate for dogs and cats. And the other beauty of this is that the food is supplemented naturally, so supplemented from Mother Nature, as opposed to having to add all those synthetics. So again, back to the beginning and why this is important to you and why you should care about the presentation. Well, you're pet specialists. And pet lovers, they trust you. They're coming into your store because they're looking for your product knowledge and for your expertise. And so again, what we're hoping that this demonstration will do is just give you a few tips when you're talking to your customers to help them make the best choice for their dog or for their cat. Hopefully you've enjoyed the demonstration. Thanks so much for watching, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Thank you.